Now, if you've been watching my videos in the past, you'll know that I'm a very big fan of infrared photography. However, the infrared photography I like is of a particular type, and I model my images on the work of a photographer called Simon Marsden. Now, he was very famous for creating atmospheric ghostly images, often with a lot of grain and darkroom work, as this was done on infrared film, which you sadly can no longer get, it's no longer made. Now, the reason I love this type of image so much is that the image is black and white, but it just seems not quite right. When you first look at it, it is a monochrome image, but there's a feeling of unease, I think, because it just doesn't seem right. Something's off kilter. And that, for me, is the first point at where you're thinking that unease is giving you that ghostly feel to the image, which is exactly what we're looking for. Now, the image I'm going to use for this short tutorial, it was taken in a local woodland, a very dark woodland, really overhanging trees. And I think this image was also enhanced because on the day I shot it with my digital camera, but I shot using a sort of 1970s, 1980s 30mm vintage lens. And you'll often find that old lenses, they don't perform at the same level as modern equivalent lenses, and they have quirks which, you know, you can even see differences between the same lens but different copies. So this is the image I'm going to use. Now, the first thing to recognize is that you need to start with an image that you can see the potential for a ghostly image in. It's generally true that if you put rubbish in, you'll get rubbish out. And I could immediately see with this image, I had the potential, you know, with that pathway meandering into the woodland, all those trees overarching it with the dark, really dark, grasping branches that seem ready to clutch at anyone who dares to walk that route through the woods. Now you see it's already working. So let's get on with some processing and see what we can do with this image.
Right, so the first thing we need to do is bring our image into some editing software. And for this tutorial, what I've done, I've brought it into the software that I use, which is Affinity Photo. Now, it doesn't particularly matter which software that you use, whether you use Lightroom or whether you use Photoshop or anything else. The things that I will be doing on here are sort of common things that you have in all that software. There's nothing really complicated that I'm going to do. So as you can see, we've got this original image. Now, if you want to see how this image was created in the first place, how we got to this stage, then you need to take a look at this video up here. So we've brought this into the software, and as you can see, it's got that characteristic red color that you get with an infrared image. So the first thing that I'm going to do is reduce the saturation and vibrance down to -50 and -100 to give me a true black and white image. And this is actually in the raw processor, so this is before I take it in Affinity. This is like the raw stage before I take it to further development, further into the software. Now, when looking at the image now, it does look a little bit dark, so what I'll probably do is lighten it up a bit. And as you can see on this here, it is clipping some of the highlights, which will be this section here. I'm not particularly too bothered about that with this type of image. With a classic shot where you're doing a landscape or something, obviously you want to keep everything within these two areas so that you're not losing any of your shadows and you're not clipping any of your highlights. But for this image, I'm after a certain effect, and I think it will work better with more light in that area there. So that's what I'm going for, but it's entirely up to you. Now, one of the other things I like to look at this stage is clarity. And this is something I've just found from experience. So if you look at the clarity slider here, if I take this up to +100, you get a really crunchy image that is full of detail, quite busy. I'm not looking for that. I want something that's sort of quite dreamlike. And what I've found is if I take this in the opposite direction to -100, you do get this really dreamy effect. And that's exactly what I'm looking for at this stage. Now, obviously, I'm going to have to do something else to this image. But as I say, at this point, I quite like this. I mean, you can mess around with this as much as you want. You can perhaps not take it as far. But as I say, for me, I want it really, really dreamlike, and that gives me that effect at that point. So I'm not really going to mess around with anything else in here. I'm quite happy with that. What I might do is just do a little bit of a crop. So, because one thing I did notice with this image is that it does seem to be slightly skewed, and it's only a little bit, just a touch. And I think that's better. And what I'll do, I'll just extend that back out again and down. Let's have a look. Yeah, I think I'm quite happy with that. So hit enter, and that's the image, and I'll now take through to develop it. So hit develop, and that brings that through to there. Right, so now we've brought the image through from the raw processor into the main software. The first thing I'm going to do, and this is something I didn't used to do a lot of in the past, but when you're doing quite a few changes to an image, if you don't duplicate layers and do each one on a different layer, what you'll find is that if you find a section that you thought looked good and then you think, actually, I don't like it, if it's all on one background copy of your image, all on that one original image, then you can't really take it off without a lot of hassle. So if you do sort of just keep duplicating your layers. So the first layer that I'm going to do here, and again, it's important to change the name so you know what it is, and I'm going to call this Dodge. And basically what I now try and do, let's make the image a little bit bigger. With black and white images, what I find is what you're trying to do is create contrast between the light and the dark areas. And that's what really helps to make your image stand out. So initially what I'm going to do here, I'm going to hit the dodge brush. So this is a lot of dodge and burning. Obviously up here you can change, like with all software, you can change the width of the brush and you can change the opacity of what you're doing. So here on the dodge side, it's lightening areas up. So I can already see on this image that there are areas that look slightly lighter. So if you look here on this path, there's a light section. And actually that's a bit aggressive, I think. So I'll take that down to maybe 23. And all you're doing is gradually looking through for these light areas and perhaps just making them even slightly lighter. And the reason I sort of zoom in is so that, and occasionally what I'll do is zoom back out and just see what effect that's had. And there's a lighter bit here as well, just across the path. And then there's a light section, very subtle. Anywhere where you can see that it's slightly lighter, then just hit on that and then lighten it up a little bit further. And you know, you can use a graphics tablet instead of this if you want to be even more precise. I'm just doing it on the laptop today. This is going to be quite a rough edit, just so that I can show you what I'm doing to get to that final image. What I also noticed with this image as well actually is that there's a slight overbalance because you've got this really dark overarching branches here, and then it's slightly unbalanced. But what I'm going to try and do is bring out these blacks in these tree trunks here, and perhaps some of this blackness here, as well as highlighting the lighter areas, just to try and balance it up a little bit more. And it really is like, it's just like painting over an image and just using your eyes to see actually where that could be a little bit lighter. And just highlighting it even more, bringing that lightness out a little bit more. And then obviously what happens as well. So what I'll do is I'll do that, and then I'll also duplicate that again. And this one I will call burn. So the important thing about this is you can see, look, what effect that is having. So you can turn it on and off, and you can see where I've lit the areas up and what effect that's had. Now the burn is obviously the opposite. So you go on the burn tool. I'll just make this one a little bit bigger. I want to be a little bit more. And immediately the first thing I'll do is darken the areas around the light bits that I've already lit up. So again, we're increasing contrast. But all the while we're keeping the overall dreamlike effect of decreasing the clarity on the overall image. And as I say, this isn't the definitive way to do it. This is just how I enjoy doing it. And I'm quite roughly doing it here. As I say, what I generally do is, and as you can see, there's lighter at the top and then it's darker underneath these. So that'll help, again, try and balance the image up a little bit more. Because what we want is a balance on the left and on the right. And then so you're being led down this pathway in the center. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to continue editing this, and then we'll come back to it when I've done this section, because it is quite laborious, and I'll probably be at it for about an hour, just lightening and darkening areas. My whole goal with this is to keep the image quite dreamlike, and to have this path leading the viewer down into this section here, into the darkness at the back of the image. So we'll leave it there for the minute. I'll come back to you when I've finished this bit, and then we'll move on to the next stage. I've done a really rough edit of this image now. I mean, if I was doing it, and I'd spend a lot more time getting this just as I wanted it, but I think for the purposes of this tutorial, it's really just showing you the methods that I use. So at this point, as soon as I'm really happy with what I've done, what I will then do is just flatten the document. So it's now all down to one layer again, and then I'll go into adjustments, and often what I'll find is just doing a levels adjustment. So as you can see here, you've got the default, a darken and lighten, and a lighten up. I'm going to hit the darken. Now I quite like that, but it is a little bit dark, because it does add to the mystery with all these dark areas. When it's too light, what I find is it can remove some of the mystery. So I think just about there. I'm going to leave it at that. Yeah, that's quite nice. I'll just quickly flatten that down. I'm happy with that. What I'll also probably do at this stage is a vignette on the image. So again, that just helps if you've got areas that are a little bit distracting, say up here where it's quite light, by putting a vignette on. I mean, you can do it with dodge and burning or anything. You can darken these areas down, but I just like to sometimes just do that, just to so look, I can change the shape. I'm quite happy with that shape, I think. So we've got a vignette on there. Quite happy with that now, how that's looking. As I say, I think it's all personal preference, really. And I just find that now I've darkened this image, it just adds to the mystery. You can't see into areas that you could see into before. So if you're walking down a woodland path and it's dark like this, it just does add to the mystery. And as I say, what I'm looking for is a Simon Marsden type image, which is all about ghosts and spectres and being alone in the dark. And yeah, this just does add to that, really. So one of the other things that you'll find with Simon Marsden images, because they were taken on film, they are quite grainy. So at this point, what I would probably do as well is just look to add a little bit of noise. And if we zoom in on the image, you can see the grain we can add here. Now obviously You can add as much or as little as you want. Let's just have a look what that looks like when we hit on the monochrome there. That looks a little bit too aggressive, I think. Probably about 15%. Just have a look. Yeah, that looks quite nice. You know, if you're looking for an image that you'd be happy to put on your wall, then it's down to your preference. What do you like? So this is what I like. So that's obviously what I'm going for. And then finally, when all that's been done, again, we just need to sharpen the image. I'm going to sharpen it here today. I mean, generally, I won't sharpen an image until I know what I'm outputting it for. So, you know, if I'm printing this, I'll sharpen it to a different level than if I am putting it on social media. So I don't like to over sharpen this an awful lot. So I think that'll do for this image. And there we have it, the final image. A walk through the woods.
Right, I hope you found this short tutorial useful. I just really wanted to highlight before I go the main things I think that are important when doing processing of infrared photos for this ghostly effect. And the first really important point that I highlighted in the video is make sure you start with an image that has that potential to start with. So, for instance, if you took an image at your local shopping centre in infrared, it's going to be very difficult to make that into a ghostly image. When you're first starting out in this, what you want to do is give yourself the best opportunity by starting with an image that, say, you've taken that has connotations with ghosts and things anyway. So old graveyards, old churches, abandoned manor houses, anything like that will give you a good head start before you even start the processing. Then when you are processing, one of the things that I found that really does help is that clarity function. And again, it's personal preference, but I think taking that down certainly makes the image more dreamlike. And then obviously what I then do, use the dodge and burn tool to highlight the parts of the image I want to highlight to lead my viewer through that image to the vision of the image that I have in the end. So hopefully that's been useful for you. As always, if you've got any comments, please stick them in the comments below. If you want to see anything more on processing or anything else on the channel, please drop me a line, because, you know, it's always useful to have opinions of what people are wanting to see on the channel. I'm trying to do stuff that I think will be useful for you in the end, as well as enjoyable to me. So if you've not subscribed to the channel, again, please think about subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you next time for another one. Cheers, bye.